Hello and welcome back to Whispers from the Dark. I wanted to share a story with you about, well, most people know it as the spirit of death or the Grim Reaper. And I want to tell you my experience and thoughts about that and how I feel it's based on a true story. In my years of doing hospice care and home health care, I have observed and experienced a lot of strange things, as you can imagine. And I know that there's listeners out there that have also had these kind of experiences or thoughts. I'm going to take you back to 2007. My dad had just had heart and lung surgery and then chemo and got pneumonia from after the chemo. And he was at home. I was here with him. And I was also doing home health care when I could. When he would feel up to it, I would take a position. Somebody'd call me and say, hey, we need someone to sit with mom, or we need someone to cover these shifts. And if dad was doing okay, was stable enough, I would always kind of assess the situation and ask him, hey, do you think he could do without me tonight? Or tomorrow, or whatever. And I wouldn't ask him unless he was doing pretty good. And if he said yeah, and I thought he could, then I would go and do my shift. Something else I was doing was, I was part of the Patriot Guard. I would go and guard soldiers' funerals. And I spoke with him several times before and after about who I was going to guard. I'd research him a little bit. And he'd look at their obit. Whenever I'd bring it home, I'd bring the little flyer home with me, show it to him, and he would say, well, he looks like a pretty good old boy. Or, I like how they did this. I'd like something like that done for me. Well, that helped us kind of come to a decision on his flyers that I made for him to pass out, the little brochures at his funeral. And it also kind of gave me an idea of what kinds of things and how he felt about things when his time came. And we talked about such things. We talked about everything. And I was so thankful to have that. Because years ago when I started doing hospice care, I remember there was a particular patient who, I want to say she wasn't much older than me at the time. She was probably 30, maybe 35. She was young. And she had cancer. Her family were in and out. And I was her main caregiver during the day. And basically, I'd just help her fix breakfast. If she felt up to it, she'd cook a little bit. I'd cook what she couldn't do. And if she wasn't feeling good, I'd go ahead and cook it for her and let her rest. But I would always go in with her into the shower, help her get disrobed, help her take a shower, make sure she got her back scrubbed, and she loved that. I remember she loved someone to scratch her back and soap it and make sure it was good and clean, because she couldn't reach it. Most of us can't reach our backs. And she had no one else to help her, and her family were, like I said, in and out. So they really weren't there to do that kind of thing for her. And she knew she was dying. She told me she knew. Her family would tell me they knew, and the hospice nurses would come and go, and kind of, basically touch base and see how she was that day and make sure her meds were given. And then they would leave, and it was my job to stay with her and make sure that, everything went as she wanted it to go. And make her as comfortable and happy as possible and be there with her. And I think she was my first hospice patient that I had where we talked, where we really got to know each other and talked. From what I remember, the other ones were pretty much medicated and most of the time asleep. So I was able to actually speak with her and talk and become friends, even knowing that she was going to be dying. It was important to me to be someone that she could depend on, that cared for her and that cared about her. You can hire people to come care for you, but it's rare that they put the inevitable death aside and get invested emotionally in you to where they care about you. And so I kind of learned that lesson, to learn to, when appropriate, when allowed to and when it's needed, care for them and about them. So I remember speaking with her and thinking how strange it was that she couldn't talk to her parents about dying. Because she didn't want to, because she knew it would upset them. And they didn't want to confirm to her that they knew she was dying, because they didn't want to upset her. So here I am in the middle. The parents are telling me, yeah, we know, before long she'll pass and it's going to get this way, and, we understand, and we know your job is hard. And I said, yes, I understand, and I would just listen. And sometimes when her parents would say certain things, I would say, well, have you discussed this with her? Have you talked to her? And they would say, oh no, we don't want to upset her. We don't want to make her upset. She's got enough to focus on. And inside of me, I was saying, well, it would be less stress for her overall if y'all opened up and literally sit down and discuss this. It would be a relief for her to know y'all were on the same level and on the same page, instead of her bouncing back and forth between chapters. I mean, bless her heart. I hope in spirit she knows and is somehow knows that I cared, and I learned some lessons from her and her situation that has helped me throughout my life dealing with others. I hope she knows she didn't, that she didn't go in vain, and the things she taught me was appreciated and remembered. I don't remember her name, but I remember her face, and I remember her smile, and how gentle and brave. I don't know, she was amazing. She was an amazing woman, and to think that she wasn't but just a few years older than me when she passed made me understand and realize they can happen at any age. I mean, when I was 6 years old, my best friend died of a brain tumor. And Rhonda was her name, and she was 5. So I know it can happen at early ages. It's just that when you're 6 years old, it doesn't click. But when you're 26, or about that age, whatever age I was, it does click. It makes you think. So here's this hospice patient that knows she's going. She can't tell her parents, yeah, I know I'm going. I want, y'all to do this or that, or I want y'all to remember this, or please don't be upset about whatever, or I forgive you about. Well, she wasn't able to do any of that, to my knowledge, because the parents didn't want to get on the same, didn't want to talk to her about it, because it upset them. They didn't want to upset her. She knew she was dying. She faced her mortality. And it upset her, but she was coming to grips with it and adjusting and accepting it and didn't want to upset them. So I'm hoping, because of my stories that I'm telling you, makes you learn from other people's mistakes and maybe give you something to think about for your own family and in your own situation and experiences for the future. When someone is going, they usually know it. If it's a long-term disease or cancer, they usually have like an inner gut feeling that tells them, long before the test or confirming it. There's a lot of people who know. Well, as soon as they know, then they've got their own inner dialogue going on in their heads and in their hearts, and they have to do the anger and the denial and all the different levels of grief, and then they come to the acceptance. And that doesn't mean they say, okay, I'm going to roll over and die now. That just means that, okay, this is inevitable. Understand this is what I'm facing. There's steps between now and then that my body and spirit will go through. And so now I got to make the best of what I got left. And the people around me that I'm leaving behind that I love and love me. And so that's how that happens with hospice patients. And of all the hospice patients I've taken care of, and over the years, I've probably taken care of maybe a couple of dozen, maybe, I don't really know. But I can tell you, each one, you go in there knowing when you first start with them that they're going to die. I mean, they're hospice. You trust the fact that they're hospice means that doctors have assessed them, tests have been made and done, and results show they have a disease that is terminal, resulting in death within 6 months. That's the rules of hospice. To be a hospice patient, you have to have a condition, a disease that the medical establishment declares that's terminal, that will end in loss of death within 6 months. And they won't approve you for hospice unless those criteria are made. Well, because of my experiences, my gut feelings, and my training in the past, I've experienced some really strange situations about hospice and about the angel of death, so to speak. But the one I'm going to speak about right now is a patient that I had that started in November, Thanksgiving night, matter of fact, 2007. I was here with my dad, seeing, we were hanging out, everything was good. And I get a phone call. And it's an agency that I worked part-time out of at the time. And they called and said, hey, we got a lady. We know it's Thanksgiving, but we got a lady that is in the hospital in Fort Worth. She's from Denton. And they just diagnosed her today with cancer. And a month or so ago, she lost her husband from cancer. And we took care of him through his hospice care. And so the girls that were there for the months taking care of the father want to take care of her, or her husband wants to take care of her, but they just want a little break for the holidays to be with their families. So is there any way you could do a night shift and just sit with her at the hospital so she's not alone, the hours after she was diagnosed terminal? And I said, oh, wow. And I got her name. And I got the information. And I said, let me call you back. So I sat here and thought about it. I got on the internet and I found her husband's obituary. And I swear I felt like someone hit me in the gut. Because when I saw it, I said, oh, Daddy, do you remember the obituary you talked to me about in the paper a month or so ago about the war hero? And he said, yeah, I do. That guy had more medals. And I said, I know. I said, how are you feeling right now? And he looked at me kind of strange, and he said, I'm doing pretty good today. And I said, well, I knew you had been, but I was just curious. Do you think you could do without me tonight? And he said, yeah, I'd be fine. Why? And I explained about his wife, the man, the war hero that we had. See, my dad had gotten the newspaper in October. He got it every day. He'd read the obits, and if it was someone he knew or someone that worked at whatever company that he used to go and buy things at, he'd say, oh, I knew this good old boy, and he worked at whatever, and his boss was whomever. And or if it was a veteran, he'd say, oh, he was in whatever war, and maybe you'll do his service. And so if it was close, the service was close, I would usually go if Dad was feeling okay. Because at that time, I was a full-time student, EMT student, online, recertifying. So I really didn't have anything else to do if Dad was feeling well. So I would go and guard soldiers' funerals. And so Dad remembered that obituary and reading it to me and us talking about it. And I said, well, that man's wife has just been diagnosed with cancer. And I'll never forget, my dad looked at me, shook his head and said, oh, heck. He said, well, they'll be together soon then. I said, yeah, they will. He said, yeah, you go be with her. When you tell her I said I'm sorry too, that she lost her husband. I said, okay. So I go sit with her that night in Fort Worth. And the next day she transferred to her home in Denton. And basically they just, they have pretty much everything there that they use for him. And all they really need is she wanted to be in the living room, so they put a hospital bed in the living room. She didn't want to be in the back, in the bedroom where he was, where their bed was, because it was in the back of the house away from everything. She wanted to watch the TV and be around activity and life. And I understand that. Bless her heart. My heart really reached out to her, but she just lost her husband. And she knew she was sick while he was dying. She just didn't know what was going on. And after they buried him, she started going to the doctor, was transferred to tests, to have tests done and transferred to other hospitals, and then she's confirmed. I can only imagine what she went through and her daughter went through. I can only imagine. and I don't want to go there. But here I am waiting for a call. So they call me and let me know what shifts are available for her at her home. And I said, well, I'll have to see, depending upon how Dad's doing. And they knew that. They understood. So I started, when I could, going to see her, taking care of her, or being there for her. And one time she was asleep, and the girls, I don't know why, but for some reason there were two different aides there when I came to work, or they came in early together. I don't remember. It was right, I want to say, it was maybe a week or so after she's transferred home, and they were both there. And usually there's only one guard or one aide there whenever I would get there. But for some reason they all became family. The girls that had taken care of her husband had really become like family to each other and to their family, to the patient's family and the patient. So for some reason, two of them were there, and they were moving things around, kind of cleaning things up. The patient was asleep, and they said, do you know what this is? And they showed me a baby monitor on the table in the kitchen. And I said, yeah, it's a baby monitor. And they said, well, this one back here. And they moved it forward, turned it on. And they said, see the bed? And I said, yeah. And they had already given me a tour of the house, so I knew that was their bedroom, and that was where her husband had passed. And that's where he had been before he passed. He wanted to go to his bed. And they said, well, we used to sit and watch him. And his wife, which is the current patient, and us were sitting in here one morning and fixed breakfast. We're sitting here, and he had already eaten and taken his meds, and he was asleep. And we were sitting here talking and drinking coffee and watching him. And all of a sudden, we saw him start to wake up and be agitated. So we went in there to see what was up and to get him calmed back down. And he kept saying, who's that guy? Get him out of here. I don't know who he is. Get him out of here. And there was no one there. So they thought he was hallucinating because of the morphine, the medication they gave him, which is very common. Everybody trips on morphine. People, no matter what age, you hallucinate. But it's worse when you're older. It affects you more, your mental capacities, when you get older. I mean, you can get combatant and physically violent. My dad did that after surgery. His dad did that. So, I mean, it's obviously genetic, but it's also a geriatric thing. When you're older, certain medicines affect you a different way and stronger, and so mentally. And so they thought that's what it was, and that's totally understandable. And so they went on, got him calmed down, and went on about their business. And then they kept watching him, and when he would start to wake up and look over towards the left side of the bed, over on the corner, they started looking over to see what it was he kept looking at and gesturing towards. And they saw something kind of what looked like move on the bed. But the bedspread was across the bed and straight, and so, but it looked like there was movement or something. So they'd go in there to look, and one time they said they actually saw a little bit of the bedspread move back a little bit, like someone had sit there on the corner of the bed, which is the other side of his bed, but which would have been on his left side at the foot. And they couldn't understand what it was, but obviously something had been there, and they'd been watching him. He didn't get up and move that. You'd have had to really been standing and sitting down, scooting back a little bit to make the bedspread do that. as what they said. And they said they kept watching, and they kept watching, and he kept saying that there was someone there. There was a man there in a dark suit. There was someone there. Well, the daughter even came, and they saw that there was something dark there occasionally, and they saw the bed look like someone was sitting on it. And the daughter was a missionary. I mean, she was hardcore religious, sweet, sweet lady. And she was a missionary, and she didn't know what to think of this. Well, they talked to the hospice nurse, and the hospice nurse explained it was probably the angel coming to him. Coming to him to get him more familiar with the angel, so when it was his time to cross, he wouldn't go alone. And I thought, wow, that is cool. So I came home, I talked to Daddy, and I said, Daddy, I'm going to tell you something really strange that I was told. This is something I haven't seen, but I was told. That there's an angel, I guess you call it angel of death, that comes to someone maybe days before they die, so they can get familiar with the energy, or seeing the person, or not being alone, or whatever. So whenever it's their time, when their body finally gives out, they're not alone, and that angel helps them cross over. And he said, really? And I said, yeah. And he said, well, isn't that the Grim Reaper? And I said, I don't know. I guess so. He said, well, wow. And I said, well, Daddy, I think it's kind of cool. I think it's actually quite beautiful, if that's true. And again, I haven't seen anything. I've just heard stories from 3 or 4 people. But if that is true, if there is a spirit or an angel of death that shows up to help you and to be by you, so you can get familiar with it, being present, so when you go, you don't feel alone, and you're able to go with it, then I think that's pretty damn cool. He said, yeah, I guess it is. I said, it's just that, again, Hollywood takes something that is based on a true story, or based on real facts, or whatever, on something that really happened, and they bastardize it by changing it up and making it evil or negative. And he said, yeah, I guess that's right. He said, but if that's what it is, that's not bad. And I said, no, Daddy, it didn't. I said, but do me a favor. He said, what's that? I said, if ever you feel like there's someone around that you can't see, or if you can see them, that's fine too, because maybe you can see them, maybe you can't, I don't know. I think everybody's different. And I said, but if you ever feel like there's something there, tell me. That way I won't leave. I'll stay with you, because that probably means your time is near. I said, can you make me that promise to tell me if you feel something or see something? And he said, sure. Well, my dad didn't tell me. So that's why I think that when he passed, it wasn't from cancer. I think he had an aneurysm and it went real quick. I think it was an accident. It was a medical thing that just happened. Just because of how everything happened. But he never told me he felt or saw or heard anything. But he knew he didn't go alone. I was here. But just to let you know, there really is an angel of death. And I know that sounds like, because of Hollywood, the Grim Reaper thing, that's all scary and horrendous. But if you think about the original premise of it, a spirit comes to you to be with you and to try to comfort you and be at your side, so when your time goes or comes, you don't go alone. I think that's beautiful. I think that's really cool. So just remember, when you're around a hospice patient, talk to them. If you're around someone that's had cancer, chemo, and they're elderly and they're not doing well, chances are their time is close. They might not be diagnosed hospice, but their time is coming close. Talk to them. Even if it's uncomfortable a little bit for you at the beginning, or that you think it might be for them, don't automatically assume that's going to bother them. Slowly lead into it. You know, you can talk about, hey, use my channel as a guide. So, you know, I read this, or I heard this story on a YouTube channel the other day that made me start thinking, maybe there's more going on in the world than we know about. And use me as an excuse. Bridge the gap. Reach out and actually get them, like, talking. In the end, you will be better for it, and I know they will, because once they start thinking about things, they'll feel like they can open up and talk to you. The one thing that I do remember hospice patients saying is the I wished I would have. I wished I would have said this, or I wished I would have done that. It's the regrets they carry with them. And a lot of them are mental regrets that they don't talk about. Things that they wish that said or let their family know, you know, hey, yeah, I knew I was going to go. I just didn't know how to say it. I knew it upset you, so I didn't say it. Well, that's not doing them service. If you don't open up that line of communication with them, you're doing a disservice to them. And that's your loved one. You would want to be done differently. I'm sure. I know I would. Well, I gave you something to think about. Now think about it. And thanks for listening. Before you guys start leaving comments asking me if the angel of death showed up to guide this patient on like it did for her husband, to my knowledge, it didn't. Now, it may have for her, but showed no outwardly signs. Now, I'd kind of like to think that maybe her husband came to her in her mind and said, honey, it's okay, follow me, and got her by the hand and gently led her. That's how I like to see it in my mind happening. But who knows? But to my knowledge, nothing was seen or felt when it was her time. But just remember, this does occur. It has happened. It's well documented. May have gone on for centuries. Who knows? But I think it's kind of comforting to think, when it's your time to go, that a comforting spirit, something that makes you feel safe and not alone, can show up. So when you go, you're not alone. So next time you watch a movie that has the Grim Reaper or the Angel of Death mentioned, know that that was based on a true story. Good night.